what I would say was arguably the height of my career. I was about to have my first $1 million year. I surprised, I think, everybody by basically walking away from the corporate world. And I decided in that time that my Donna 2.0 was going to be executive coaching, and ultimately opened my own business as a solopreneur.
I love that. And when you were in that chapter, did it always feel like you were always going to be in corporate, or that's where you were going to be for the rest of your career?
I don't know if I always knew, but I will tell you this. I had it going for a long time in the back of my mind that I wanted to transition to something where I didn't have to do it for the money. I remember a really specific moment. Our CEO was on stage kicking off the plans for the new year and how amazing it was going to be. And I remember feeling absolutely nothing. Like I was just so flatlined. I thought I could care less.
Donna, thank you so much for joining A Little Less Corporate. As a reminder, I kicked off A Little Less Corporate, a new podcast to talk about exactly that. What does it mean to be a little less corporate? And for this first series, I'm bringing on people that had an impact on me on that journey and making that decision. So excited to have you as someone who has actually been an executive coach to me and has been part of the conversations when I was thinking about what was next and if I was going to take that leap. So Donna, thank you for being here. And I'd love for you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about your story.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on your podcast. I appreciate it. I guess I'll just give you a little backstory. So when I started my corporate career, I was kind of coming out I was a Division I tennis player and an MBA, and I had like a ton of self-confidence and passion and was entering the workforce. And I was lucky enough my first role was at Xerox, and they had this amazing high potential program that I don't think exists anywhere in the world anymore, but should, where they were creating general managers. So they literally, rotated me through every functional area in the company and different geographies around the world. And I eventually became a vice president general manager of a business unit when I was only 35 years old. So amazing to kind of think about that now. But that really gave me a ton of confidence, and I parlayed that into, other roles in great organizations like Dell and Cisco, Tennis Canada, and ultimately VMware. And at what I would say was arguably the height of my career, when I was right around the 50 mark, not to age myself, but, I was about to have my first $1 million year. I surprised, I think, everybody by basically walking away from the corporate world. And initially I took a year off to travel, and I decided in that time that my Donna 2.0 was going to be executive coaching. And I found the best coach training program in the world, kind of went there, got my certifications, and ultimately opened my own business as a solopreneur, where I coach executives one-on-one. I do team leadership coaching. I do some leadership training for organizations, as well as I facilitate a CEO peer group. So that's basically my business, and I love almost every aspect.
I love that. It's so funny whenever I talk to people that have taken the step to the solar entrepreneurship. It's not just one thing. There's just always so many things they're doing. So definitely want to dive more into that. But I love that. And, when you were in that chapter, did it always feel like you were always going to be in corporate, or that's where you were going to be for the rest of your career? Or did you always know that you might potentially become an entrepreneur?
I don't know if I always knew, but I will tell you this. It's really interesting when I think back. When I was going to leadership training for the first time, when I was sent to it, I can remember taking the facilitators aside at the end and saying, "Oh, wow, I love what you're doing. How do I get to do what you're doing? I think I would love this." And so I always had this thing in kind of the back of my mind that that was something, and I would talk to people, and honestly, I would say, "Okay, well, what do you make?" And then it wouldn't be nearly what I was making in my corporate role. So then I would say, "Okay, let me put that aside." Really interesting. When I was 40, I believe, I engaged a financial analyst to say, "Make me a plan. I want a plan to know." I knew that early on that in this field, most people, they said, don't make more than $100,000, which was way less than I was making. And I said, make me a financial plan that lets me transition, tells me when I can transition to it, when I have financial security to be able to only make $100,000 a year and live the way I want to live. And it was basically a 10-year plan. As they said, okay, well, when you're 50, you will be there. So to answer your question, I mean, I had it going for a long time in the back of my mind that I wanted to transition to something where I didn't have to do it for the money. It was something that I could want to do for me.
I do think it's a misconception sometimes that if you make the jump, that if you're in a big corporate job or you're incredibly successful, that you won't necessarily make the same amount of money, because I think there's actually a much greater upside, right? But I think that there is maybe that fear that people have, um, but not necessarily true.
Yeah. I mean, everybody's different, like in terms of what their financial security, situation is, or how comfortable they are or aren't with putting stuff on the line, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. One thing that I wanted to go back to is you were just talking about and describing that kind of moment that you were going to make this leap, and you're going to have your biggest year ever, your 7-figure year. Was there a specific moment or something that happened or something that maybe forced that decision to decide this is actually when I'm going to walk away?
Two things I would say. So one, I remember a really, really specific moment where I was at the big, kickoff event of the year with 20,000 people in a room in the Javits Center in San Francisco. And our CEO was on stage kicking off the plans for the new year and how amazing it was going to be. And I remember feeling absolutely nothing. Like I was just so flatlined. I thought I could care less. Everybody was super excited, and I was like, I don't care about this anymore. And I'm always been somebody who is, follow your passion. If you don't love what you're doing, why are you doing it? And I thought, oh gosh, this is, I've lost it. I'm not where I want to be right now. And then I will also say that, as another side to that, I had just gotten married again at a late stage in life. And I also was absolutely working around the clock and was just didn't have the time I wanted to spend in my new life as well. So I think those two things, just realizing I had kind of lost the passion for what I was doing and having this other thing that I wanted to go spend more time doing or figuring out my new life design. I think those two things pushed me over the edge.
And we've had conversations about that, spending your time where your values are. Uh, was that, your entire corporate career where you felt like your time was heavily weighted there? Or did you ever have periods where you felt like you had balance?
I rarely felt like I had balance, but having said that, I'm a work-centric person, I think, in general, and so if I don't have other things that are pulling me, and in my scenario, I wasn't married, I didn't have kids, I was more open, I think, to pouring myself into that, but interestingly enough, now with my clients, I have them do, and I think we probably did it together, but I have them do a wheel of life that says, in all aspects of your life. So your career is just one aspect, but we look at your family, your friends, your romance, your where you live, your health. We look at all these aspects, and I have people rate them on a scale of 1 to 10. And if I had done that with myself, I would have said my career was a 9.5 or a 10 out of 10. I was killing it. Everything was great. But probably every other aspect of that would have been a 5 or under in terms of where I really wanted to be. I look back at pictures. I don't look great. I have huge bags under my eyes. I was a little heavier. I wasn't in great shape. Was under a ton of stress, and it shows.
I vividly remember going through that exercise with you, and I imagine our wheels probably at the time would have looked really similar. But I think it's such a good exercise, and anyone who is thinking about potentially, leaving corporate or, is unsure or kind of that at that flat line that you described, it's such a good exercise to go through. Um, so the reality after leaving, I know that you said that you took a year off. Talk to me a little bit more about that. And after you quit, was there, I think I told you this the last time we talked. I felt like I was like running up a mountain. And then when I was done and I had a period before I started my first clients, I felt like I fell off a cliff. So I'd love to hear just
Your experience.
And I told you as well, though, it's been 5 weeks for you. So the falling off a cliff, it hasn't been very long. So don't sweat about that.
really fast off that cliff.
So for me, like I said, I had the financial security at the time to be able to really take the year without worrying too much about it. But what I will say is when I got serious about, when you got to the point of setting up the business itself, so many things were that I had not considered were quite difficult, and just things I hadn't considered. I think things like, first of all, business development for yourself is different. I was in sales most of my career, but when you're generating business for yourself, it's very different. So getting used to that motion and how you go about doing that in a way that feels right to you. The back office things were very, very painful. Figuring out what systems you're going to use for billing or accounting. What do I need to do? Do I need to be incorporated or not incorporated? I got my first client. They're fortunate to have them be a large corporate client, and they have a contract that they send to me, the vendor contract that's, all these T's and C's, and I have to, engage a lawyer, and should I be accepting these? Oh gosh, I need insurance. Do I need a website before I take the client, or is it okay if they go and search me and don't see me? I mean, there's just so many things that I never thought about that were like, oh gosh, it's so painful.
You're basically
Reading my journal entries from the last 5 weeks. Because I think everyone goes through that, and that's the part that's so overwhelming. I've never been in sales before. I feel so uncomfortable trying to close a client. It's not even something that I can fathom is try to sell myself. I just want them to hire me. And then just all those steps, I think that everyone has to go through. I actually almost lost a client because I had the wrong business license and it wasn't going to close. So I think that's so natural that all of those things, and maybe they've gotten a little bit easier with time. There's like Zen Business and a few other systems, but even, me as a RevOps person who lives in systems, I've even found that quite overwhelming of even just how I set up my own payroll and all of those things. We talked a little bit more about like the tactical business side that you're setting up. But one of the things that I'm really curious about, selfishly, is to talk more about the structure, your life structure, the discipline, the consistency. I have definitely been finding that for myself. Again, I didn't realize it would fall off so quickly, and that corporate gave me so much structure. So, what was that like for you? And was there a curve, or did you find it right away?
I'd love to dig into that.
I live by the to-do list. And I also am somebody that if it's as much as I felt good about designing my life and leaving more space for the things that were important to me. If I don't schedule it in, like I'll say the personal side, or I talk about tennis. I still play a ton of tennis. So if I need to practice before the league, I have to have all that calendared. I have to have it in my to-do list. If there's something, even, my in-laws are ill right now and we have to offer like a lot of support to them, I try to calendar in, we need this amount of hours, in the week to be up there supporting them. Because if I don't, I always orient to the work thing that's on my list, and then those other things fall off. So that's a system of accountability for myself that I've found works. I do think everybody's wired different, and one of the things I do with my clients, it's a framework developed by Gretchen Rubin called the Four Tendencies, and it basically outlines what your tendency or behavior pattern is as it relates to why you do things or why you don't do things, and what your relationship is to accountability or holding yourself accountable. And I think what you've described for yourself is maybe you're somebody that needs an outer system of accountability. If somebody is asking you to do somebody, or somebody's providing that structure to you, you readily get it done. But if it's just you and nobody else is, looking at you for whether you've done it or not, then you're struggling. So you would benefit from having people that hold you accountable. Again, whether that's a business coach or whether that's other people kind of around you that are, that people in your network that you've developed that says, hey, let's check in every week and make sure I've, done all these things I said I was going to accomplish this week.
That's so interesting. So there's 4 categories. And if people, and I actually think that could be true, right? Like I don't think I need to work for someone else, but I do need systems of accountability, because when I didn't have that, I definitely found that I wasn't as productive as I normally am, which I'm a hyper productive person. Question on that. If you fall into one of those 4 categories, do you think that you can actually move categories, or is it something that is just like inherently you?
It's something that's inherently you, but you can always, by knowing how you are, then you can take action accordingly to be successful. So there's no category that's ultimately a more successful type than the other, but it's just knowing if you're somebody that needs an outer system of accountability, then get that outer system of accountability. It's like if going to the gym, for instance, you're somebody that needs to have signed up for the gym membership and, to go. You're not going to go just work out in your house without anybody.
Look at me turning this podcast into a free coaching
Course. Tell me more about that.
I was thinking, though, on that same topic, when I was in my, big corporate roles, I had an executive assistant that was charting out my whole day, and literally I'd be in back to back to back to back to back meetings from 8:30 to 6 or whatever. And so the amount of productivity, as you say, or what you're able to get out of a day was way more than what I do on my own, but I also don't think that maybe was healthy or productive in a way. I mean, I say productive. I try to reframe what productive means now to, is it aligned to how I want to be living my life, how I've designed what I am doing now, not more stuff, more meetings is better, more whatever, but was my day aligned to my life design?
And that makes a lot of sense, right? Because I think that there's this, I don't know what to call it, like a false sense of productivity that people have in corporate jobs where it's, I was in Zooms for 12 hours straight today. I am so productive. I work so hard.
And then, like,
Well, what did you actually accomplish during that time? Was it
actually,
productive? Were you actually moving the needle? And then because you were in those back-to-back calls, did that actually take away from other things that were really important? Um, was there anything when you were in the corporate world that you would look at now and say, well, actually, that was better?
Selfishly, like, kind of, again, just the status, or, the respect that just came from the position, that the money, honestly, like, just in terms of easy money. I think now the ease of getting a paycheck, I think it's, wow, like, it doesn't take that much. I see what it takes, how much effort it takes to bring money in the door, and it's very different. It's like, wow, I just showed up. Some days I didn't, maybe didn't have to do that much. Some days I was uber busy. I mean, generally I was busy, but I think the ease of the paycheck, again, all the back office stuff done, my benefits are taken care of. People get take care of the billing. If there's a problem, I can turn it over to somebody else. This, I feel like I am the accounting department. I'm the legal department. I am sales. I'm marketing.
Even just like I keep thinking about like the ability to delegate. So I'm
now just
in
down.
this process of scaling and making my first hire. And there'll be times where I'm like, oh, I want to do these 3 things, but they're not like priority 1 things that bring in the paycheck, but they're really good to do. And I wish
I had someone just hand that off too.
that's definitely the delegation piece is something that I'm getting used to not having yet.
And I think the camaraderie, I mean, let's face it, it's I wouldn't trade it off, because for me, I'm a flexibility fanatic. So I love being in charge of my own time. I love not being boxed into things. So that trade-off is great. But some of my best friends were from my corporate roles that I had. And honestly, going to tons of events, sporting events, concerts, hosting clients, going to the Olympics, hosting clients, those things don't happen anymore, right? So, I definitely miss some of the corporate perks.
And when you think about rebuilding kind of your different path, now post
Corporate.
walking away from that. And by the way, I related to so much of that. I think back to the golden days of Salesforce is what I would say, and like Metallica concerts and going to the insane sporting events or sitting at the Giants game behind the home plate. Like all of those like insane experiences and things I was doing at like 25 years old that I'll probably never experience again, or maybe we'll see. But I think that that's definitely a trade-off. But to your point, you get the flexibility, you get to own your own time, you get to design your own life, which personally is, I think, worth it over all the tickets or concerts in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But so when you left, you took a year and you started building your business. So you started in the executive coaching. Tell me a little bit about that. Cause I know when we've talked and even your intro earlier, you were saying there's a lot of different things you're doing. I'd love to learn more about
The post corporate
and
career.
how that evolved over time.
Well, stage one was, and I will say there are people that leave high level corporate environments and kind of hang this shingle up as an executive coach the next day. And in essence, I will say they are a mentor. They maybe can impart their advice on people. But I made the decision early on that I was going to do it right, if you will. So I knew that I didn't have the skills, the skill set to be a coach. I I had my own executive coaches, so I knew what it was about. So I went about, what's the best training program there is, spent some time on that, went through the coursework, which was about like 6 months of, I'll say, just coursework, and then you go into a certification process that's about a year and a half process where you start getting clients, but you're going much more deeper dive into all the different aspects and again learning methodologies and tool sets and getting comfortable with all of that. And so it's quite involved. I think I might have mentioned to you, it was pretty sobering because you leave the corporate environment again with I had a ton of confidence in my leadership and what I could bring to the table, and going back and starting, and you're with some people that have that type of background, but many that are maybe, I don't know, entering at a very different phase of their life. They're going through the training, or maybe they were an HR person within a corporate environment and wanted to get this training. So there's all different types of people, and you're all, at an even playing field, starting a new field. And I remember the very first coaching call that they had us do during the course, go out, over the weekend and do a coaching call with somebody you don't know. And they gave us a little framework. And the person that I ended up coaching didn't understand that it was my very first coaching call ever, thought that I was maybe further along and she was going to give me a hard time. And so everything I tried to do, she derailed me, and it was brutal. And, when we went back to the course to debrief, as I was relaying how my call went, I broke down and like started to cry with this group of people. And I thought, oh my gosh, what have I done? How have I lost this much mojo? And it took, like, I really felt like I got stripped down and I had to be built back up and then really gain the confidence in knowing how to do this, and ultimately to integrating all that 25 years of executive experience and everything I did have, and to integrate the two. It took, probably took a couple of years to like really get to that stage. And I know I'm better for it now, but it wasn't easy, and now I'm proud of that. And I'm, I guess, a little even defensive when I see somebody just saying, "Oh yeah, well, I'm a coach now." And I'm like, "Well, did you, are you or not?"
And
Outside of.
coaching, I know we had talked about there's some other things that you've been focusing on. What are those?
Just curious.
I started out doing one-on-one coaching, and I found there were themes across all of my clients, things that I was doing with all of them that were really useful. And I had the opportunity to, again, put them into more of a programmatic format where I have a leadership development program that I run that's a 6-month program. I designed it myself, but I took a lot of the best practices and things that through all the different training I'd gone through and just different thought leaders out there, I would find the best pieces from each thing. And it's basically designed around the concept that every leader is unique. So everybody has their own set of strengths, their own passions, the areas they want to make an impact. They have their own set of values. And help people to uncover all of that so they really gain like this inner confidence in their unique leadership style, what they bring to the table, how they're at their best. Because I believe, we need all types of leaders. There's no one, formula for this. And that's what inspires people. I remember, early on in my career, as great as Xerox was, there was like a mold to the type of leader that they promoted. And it was a very masculine version of leadership. And we were set to powerful leadership for women, and it was basically how to dress, in this type of suit and have a powerful handshake and speak powerfully and all this kind of stuff. And I just thought, oh gosh, like I can't identify with this. And it wasn't until I saw a female leader that was, you know, super like fun, vivacious, dressed cool, came to happy hour with us, was just herself, that I was like, oh, okay, great. Like I can identify with, she was amazing and she was just as capable and impactful as anybody else, but you know, didn't project this other image. And so I just believe in that so much that we need to see different styles and have people, just lead their own way. So that's kind of what it's about. And that's my passion project, probably the thing that I am the most passionate about that I do.
And it's so funny you describing that, because I didn't have any sort of specific like leadership course that I went through when I was coming up that was focused on maybe being more in the masculine, but I know I defaulted to that, especially like in my 20s, becoming a people leader for the first time. It was, how do I act like one of the boys? How do I fit in with the men? Even, the feedback that you get, right? You start to shift into that more masculine. And it wasn't until, I don't know, a few years ago that I was like, well, actually, what does it mean to lead in my femininity by just being like authentically myself and not trying to fit in with the boys in the room? And I think that when people make that shift into their more authentic selves and they stop trying to act like everyone else, then that's when the best leadership comes out. But it's funny, it's even the other men in the room are leaning into that, leaning into the masculine to be in the boys club. So it ends up being an act by not just women, but the men themselves. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, it is. I mean, again, you talk about feedback. I mean, I've been told like to yell at people more, to be tougher. I'm like, I'm not going to yell at people. It's not my jam. So you're not going to get that from me. But that doesn't mean I'm not holding people accountable. That doesn't mean I'm not setting a high bar. And it's actually really interesting. Even I was on a panel of women leaders, and one of the leaders that was on the panel with me, she was in the background. It was virtual, so we were like on a virtual panel. She pinged me and said, "Oh, I wish I was more like you. I don't feel like I'm a great leader compared to all of you on this panel." And as she was talking, she's very much like a person who is not the front and center one. She is all about promoting her team. It's all about, she's behind the scenes. I was like, that you are just as good and as a leader. We're just different. The way we lead is different. And by the way, like she's going to inspire somebody that leads that way, that doesn't want to be the front and center cheerleader. Like she was leading from behind, leading through her people. And I'm like, believe me, you're going to inspire somebody that's like you and says, wow, look where she was able to get, look what she's been able to accomplish. I'm going to appeal to somebody else. And that's awesome.
And so true. And I've learned from all sorts of different leaders that I've worked for, and they all have different styles, and they have all kind of uniquely inspired me in different ways. So the core of that message is just like authentic leadership is actually what you should be focused on. But I love that, and I love that you kind of scaled that out. And I think so many people that are making that jump from corporate, it's you start with one thing and you think that's going to be the thing, but you kind of keep pulling on that thread and then it turns into something else, which is so exciting. And you also get to flex kind of your creativity. So what might
The thing.
leave for might end up being something completely different.
Totally.
When we think about folks that might be listening to this podcast and they're sitting here and they might be in different stages of their corporate career, maybe they are at the top of their career, or maybe they're just not loving what they're doing. Is there one piece of advice or anything that you'd like to share
For them to consider,
about
to take the lead.
or finally make that decision?
The biggest advice is to take the time to design your ideal life. I actually used a book, it's called Designing Your Life, that uses design thinking and applies it to, putting it on paper about what that looks like. And for me, that was like, even before COVID, it was work from anywhere. If I had to design it, I love to travel and I love to be in warm weather destinations in the winter. So I wanted to be able to work from anywhere. I wanted to set my own hours. I wanted, flexibility to choose my own clients and things like that. But anyway, I basically laid it out. So I knew that what I was taking the leap to was going to get me into alignment with that. So I think, sometimes you can be in your corporate role and be like, "Ugh, I just know," you probably have a feeling that you're not in the right spot or it's not quite right. I do think it's a really tough job market right now. So I wouldn't leap too soon. I wouldn't leap before I had my ducks in a row. And the ducks in the row are know what your life design is, so you know what you're going towards, and that's going to get you closer. I talked about my financial scenario. I mean, I had a good feel of like what realistically this was going to look like, that I was comfortable with financially as well. Talking to people that are in that area. So I had an unrealistic view before I talked to people about this line of work. I was shocked to learn, when I spoke to somebody, "Oh, well, if you're killing it your first year, you're probably going to make about 75,000." I was like, if I'm killing it my first year, I'm going to make 75,000. Like, that was so different, but and it was true. That was true. That's what it was the first year. So, I would have been shocked if I hadn't had those conversations. That would have never entered my mind that it could be that, that stark, right? So know what you're getting into. Like there's a stat that only 8% of coaches make over $100,000 a year. So, now I have the confidence in myself, and luckily I am in the 8%. But it's not, a foregone conclusion. It's a slog, but you needed to know that, right? So talk to people, right? Have the life design, know what you're getting into. Side hustle. Big fan of the side hustle. If you can get it going, kind of know what you're getting into ahead of time, have a taste of it, know if it's right for you, test it.
I love that. I think those are all incredible takeaways. I know I might have missed one or two of those, but I appreciate that and you sharing your story. And like I said, you have been such a big part of my story. In my very first podcast, I talked about a coaching conversation that we had when I was telling you the decision or how I would make the decision whether or not I would leave. And you very gracefully pointed out that that was a terrible decision-making framework. And we talked through it. So you didn't use the word terrible, but you did definitely encourage me to think of it differently. And I know that I wouldn't be where I am without the time that we spent together. So thank you so much for coming on.
I look forward to many more
conversations with you as I go along in this journey. And I know that so many people that will listen to this and be inspired about what you did and how you thought about it, and the decision to walk away when things are great, to pursue a life that's more aligned to our human design and who we want to be and how we want to spend our time. So thank you so much, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you. And I hope you kill it. I know you will. So